Hello everyone, welcome to the first workshop on thesis writing hosted by Verovia Academy. My name is Tu Quỳnh Hoàng and I am the founder of Verovia Academy. So we uh, we start Verovia Academy because we want to support individuals with their studies, either at university or you are preparing to go to a university for studying abroad, or you just want to continue your studies after your bachelor or master degree. Um, so with the thesis support service, we want to offer multiple services to cater to individual needs of students, because according to our research, students might need different kind of support for their thesis. So we organize three different things: small group workshops, peer support group, and one-on-one coaching. Um, so with the small group workshop, it uh, well, there are four workshops in total, and the first one is today, and it is free. The next three workshops will be a package that students can pay to join, but it will be a very small workshop, only for 6 to 8 students. So you will have more space and time to have to have the host, like Callum, give feedback on your writing, and you can also ask questions, specific questions about your writing problems. Um, Callum will talk more about the content of the next workshops. And with the peer support group, we want to give students who might be struggling with non-academic issues, for example, fear of failure, procrastination, stress, perfectionism, and insecurity, time management, uh, this kind of support. So we will organize quickly meeting, I think, on Monday, where we will meet with other 6 or 8 students, um, online, of course, and there will be a mentor to talk about these issues, to help you, maybe to give you strategies, to give you tips on how to overcome these issues. But sometimes just talking to other students who are struggling with the same thing is already incredibly helpful. To know that other people are also struggling, but they may also give you, tips or or strategies of how they dealt with it. Um, and we offer the one-on-one coaching and writing feedback for students who need like more specific help with the specific problems of their thesis or their writing. So we have the one-on-one coaching where you will meet with a thesis coach, and they will help you with problems like structure, argumentation, clarity, cohesion, or any other writing problems. And they also accompany that with um, a writing feedback where they will, yeah, maybe highlight the problems that you should pay attention to, or if you are struggling with structure, they might also help you to um, just outline a structure. And in the 30-minute video call, uh, they can give suggestions on how you can improve your writing or your thesis. And we also offer proofreading and editing service for students who almost finish their thesis, but they feel like they need more, support uh, with the language, like grammar, vocabulary, but we can also help with improving your cohesion and paragraphing. And we can also highlight the sentences or paragraphs that we feel are not clear enough, or you could have clarified better. Um, or we can also highlight those the arguments that we feel you might need more evidence or it doesn't make sense. So this service is like giving the final touch for your thesis so that it will be the best version. So the reason that we start the thesis support services is that we feel like, well, it is a pity that, you know, students, they have good content, and they have a good, very good research, but for some reasons, like especially because of their language. Fight for myself, English was not is not my native language. Um, so we think that it would be a pity if just English writing or just some, cohesion and structure problems inhibit your full potentials or the potential of your thesis. So we try to offer flexible packages so that, anyone uh, can find the service that they need with the affordable prices. For example, we offer the next 3 workshops on thesis writing skills for €40. And we offer the one-on-one coaching and writing feedback for €200 because the coach will need to read your thesis and also give writing feedback. It takes a lot of time for that. Um, and for the proofreading and editing, it depends on how many words or how good your writing already is. And but we want to offer these services at a very affordable price. So we try to put them in packages. So if you book multiple services, you can get a very big discount, like €50, €45 discount. Uh, and we also offer the weekly peer support group for free. So it is, yeah, oil, like very, very valuable packages for very affordable prices. Um, and or if there is anything that any combination that you don't find here, or there is some kind of support that you need, but it is not very it is not in our packages or in our services, you can just contact us at admin at verovia.nl, or you can go to our website, verovia.nl, and go to the thesis support service page to check out what we offer in for thesis students. So thank you so much for joining our workshop today, and I hope that you will find it useful. Now I will hand over to Callum to start the workshop on cohesion for thesis.
So, as we said, we're talking about cohesion. To some extent, we're talking about cohesion in all of these workshops. Cohesion is quite a broad idea, quite a broad thing. I think we mostly know what we mean by cohesion, but I want to hear a little bit from you. Yeah, what does that actually mean? What the hell is it? And so in the chat, I'd like you to just briefly write some ideas of things that you might think are to do with cohesion. What are we talking about when we talk about cohesion? How do you write cohesively? What kinds of things do you do or use? Yeah, so you need it in your whole thesis, especially literature review. That's absolutely true. We're going to come to talk more about this in the third workshop. So specifically working with sources. Yeah. So you need it in your whole thesis, but what is it? Like how do you make your writing cohesive?
Like, I think you can give like an example is more like obvious and easier for everyone. Like you working, for example, like productivity of the firm. So you want to like understand every aspect about that. Maybe the measurement of firm productivity, the gender, the aspect that, and maybe some of the determinants that can alter like your main variable in your thesis, something like that. And it has to make sense from the very beginning to the end.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. So assuming that's your topic, it's kind of consistency, like
Yep.
sort of yeah, consistency definitely important here. Yeah, that the beginning fits with the end, right? Absolutely, that's part of it. So kind of cohesion at a very broad scale is about structure and consistency. True. What else? Oh, how everything links together. Sophia said yes, totally right. That's more or less what we're talking about here. The connectivity, the consistency, the structure. And this also, of course, is important for things like clarity. So if your thesis is consistent, hopefully your argument, if you have an argument, is also consistent, right? So that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. So it's kind of the glue in between everything, the connectivity, the structure. So, oh yeah, I already asked you to do that. And so, as I've just said, that can be at very different levels of your writing, right? So we can talk about cohesion really at the level of like words and sentences, all the way up to the biggest structure of your whole thesis. You know, do your chapters fit together? Is your introduction cohesive in terms of how it relates to your conclusion? That's also to some extent cohesion. But we're going to start really at the beginning with the smallest, the most detailed level. So that means today we're going to look at sentences. Well, today and next workshop, we're going to look at sentences. And we're starting with really like the most basic idea of how you make your writing cohesive at that detailed level. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of sentence grammar, how you can restructure your sentences and how you can avoid problems with those sentences, things that make your sentences uncohesive. Then later, as I said, we're going to move on to talking specifically about sources. So if you have to write a literature review, for example, how do you connect all that different research in a way that's logical, clear, all those things that we just talked about. And then finally, we'll come to the very biggest scale. And now, assuming you're at a very late stage of your writing at this point, the idea will be really, how do I make sure that my thesis is consistent at very specific points in your thesis? So how do you make sure the introductions to your chapters are very clear, the transitions between paragraphs, sections, things like that, to really make that consistency very clear. And they sometimes call this the red thread. Yeah, so kind of a consistent story that goes all the way through. But today, as I said, we're going to start with sentences. And so that's going to involve today 3 sort of aspects. One thing we call information flow. Where is the information in your sentences? Avoiding repetition. So how do we make things less repetitive, better structured? And finally, linking words. So one of the most basic ways to connect within and between your sentences. So what I want to start with, and now this is talking about things that we will do today and next workshop, is I'm going to give you this short text here on screen. And what I'd like you to do on your own is to read the text and see if you can find some problems with cohesion in this text. So I'm not talking about spelling mistakes or well, there might be some grammar mistakes, but they are more problems with cohesion, problems with structure, things like that. So have a look and just for a few minutes, see if you can find a problem. And then if you think you found a problem, write it in the chat. For example, maybe we can look at the first one together. Can someone see a problem in the first 2 sentences? Anyone? You can also just speak if that's quicker. Can someone see a problem with the first 2 sentences? Oh, Wen, you're muted. I'm not sure if you're. Yeah.
I think there are many problems, but
Yeah.
I will leave the students to.
There's a couple, but let's see if someone can find at least one thing with those first 2 sentences.
I feel like from the sentences, starting with there are many ways and how it links to the sentence, it is important. And then afterward, one of the ways, like I feel like they separate sentence.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll skip ahead here. Yeah, this, right? So we can see there's a lot of repetition
Yeah.
in these sentences. You can see the same expression is repeated multiple times. And as you can see, they're also very short sentences. Just as Sophia said, we could probably combine these into a longer sentence and it would be more cohesive. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is one example. You might have briefly seen the previous examples as I moved through the slides. Maybe see if you can find 1 or 2 other problems in the rest of the text as well. And just write in the chats if you can find some problem.
And some sentences are very long as well. So then the longer it is, the more big it costs to the reader.
Yeah, exactly. We've got this very long sentence here. Yeah. See, that's all one sentence. Yeah. We're going to talk a bit more about this next workshop. It's very, very long, what we call stringy sentence, because there are too many pieces. Yeah. Part of the problem is you have these which by which and. So these are all connecting different pieces together. There are too many pieces. Yeah. Any other issues? Can someone else find something?
Maybe there's no word to demonstrate the relationship between those clauses. Yeah, I think so.
You mean these short ones that we just talked about here, or just in general? There's not so many. Or do you mean in the longer sentence? There's no linking language.
Yeah, the longer sentence.
Longer sentence. Yeah, I mean, we do have which by which and we do have in addition, for example. But it's true that the relationship is not very clear. Absolutely, or at least there's so many relationships. It's hard to read them in one go. That's true. It's true that there probably could be more linking language in this whole paragraph, but there is some linking language here already. Any other problems that you can find in maybe the earlier sentences or anywhere else?
I think for me, the second sentence, it's they listed everything and then all they want to talk about is the kinds of cohesion. So I think we should reverse it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I would totally say that's one of the problems I wanted to find here. Most of the time in English, you want to find the verb, the action word. So in this case, are or be. You want that to be quite near the beginning of the sentence. Yeah, that's kind of the center of the sentence. Here we've got a lot of stuff before we even know what they're saying about that stuff. Yeah, so exactly as you said, I would want to flip that around. You might also notice there's a bit of a grammar issue with the listing as well. So if you can see here, there are different grammatical structures for each thing that's listed, which doesn't totally make sense. Another aspect of cohesion is consistency we talked about. That's also grammatical consistency. So if you're going to make a list, each thing should be the same kind of phrase or word or whatever it is that you're listing. Yeah. That's pretty much everything I think you found. So we've got the listing issue here. We have the verb comes too late here. Yeah. We also have these very short sentences with repetition. We have some more repetition here. Yeah, repetition of texts and repetition of in addition, and this very long sentence as well with all these different pieces. And then finally, yeah, we also have slightly strange sentence structure. In these last two places, you'll see this very long sentence finishes with sentence grammar. And then the sentence afterwards, it also talks about sentence grammar, but right at the end. So it's like you've forgotten that you were talking about sentence grammar before, and then at the end, sentence grammar appears. So this is something about sentence structure, logical sentence structure. So we've just seen quite a few different examples of things that can be uncohesive, problems with cohesion that we're going to try to talk about in these first two workshops. And we're going to start with this last one. So how can we make sure this last problem doesn't happen, that things are in the right place, in a logical place? So we call this information flow, right? Meaning you want the reader to understand as clearly as possible how you're moving between different pieces of information, how that information fits together. So we're going to start with like the most basic example. Here we have a sentence, radium is a radioactive substance. And then we can choose one of A or B, same sentence, but in a different order. Which one makes the most sense? Oh,
is B to me.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to try and make a poll, but it didn't work. So I don't know what happened there. Yeah, so why B?
Just because they mentioned radium first, and then we should continue rather than mention another the subjects.
Exactly. Yeah. So the point here is the idea in the first sentence is radium, right? And then if you're going to have another sentence and it's also talking about radium, you probably want to start with radium. Yeah. In this case, it meaning radium, right? If you introduce the Curies first, it's quite confusing because the reader doesn't understand the relationship yet between this new thing, the Curies, and radium. So we call this sort of old and new information. I'll give another example. Okay, so here we have patiently reading his slides. The students wondered what Callum was going on about. All right, so now we have another two examples. Now this time don't say yet. I'm going to try and launch the poll. I don't know why it's not letting me. It's really annoying.
B.
Okay. Could be. Everyone agree? A or B?
I think it's B because the first sentence mentioned that there's the question appear. So I assume that the sentence B would link better. That's just my idea.
So what I want to think about here is information in different parts of the sentence, right? So try and think about, this is one idea, yeah, and this is another idea. Now, is there anything in these other sentences that relates to either this blue part or this red part? I'm looking specifically at the red parts here. So does this second sentence, or either of these second sentences, where does it talk about the red parts?
So student will link with everyone.
Exactly, right? It's this part. So the confusion is specifically what students wondering what Callum was going on about, right? So I'm referring back to something I already talked about in the first sentence. So, right, this first one is actually slightly clearer because I start with the thing that I just mentioned before I talk about this one person, yeah? So again, it's in this case not about what the subject of the first sentence is, it's just about what was the last part of the sentence. If I'm going to talk about that again in the next sentence, I probably want to talk about it first. So we think about this as old and new information. So in this second sentence, the old information is the new information of the last sentence. Yeah, think about it like introducing a new element each sentence. And then in the next sentence, if you want to talk about that, you briefly refer back to the old information before you introduce the new information, right? It's kind of a slightly like mechanical way of thinking about writing, but it's one very sort of clear way to think about information. So I'm going to look at a couple more examples. Now, you don't have to read this whole text. We're looking first just at these first two sentences of this text for a similar thing that's happening. Now, we've underlined the different parts of these sentences. I want to think about, in this second sentence, again, where are they talking about old information? So where are they referring back to the previous sentence? So we're looking at this part specifically here. Which part of the sentence refers to the previous sentence?
Still all information, right? Because it refers to caffeine.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, which idea about caffeine?
That like reduce sleepiness.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're looking at this part, right? Its effectiveness in counteracting sleepiness, right? It's the same idea we just heard. Caffeine reduces sleepiness, right? And now just briefly, what has actually changed? So we've got the same idea twice, but it's not in the same words. So what has changed with this second example between the first one and the second one? I'll give you a clue. So if we look at the grammar, right, in this first part, we have caffeine. This is a noun. Yeah. Then we have a verb, right? That's not the same structure in this next part. What kind of word is effectiveness? Is it a noun or a verb?
Or
or an
noun.
adjective? It's a noun, right?
Yeah.
So this is what we call a noun phrase. It's effectiveness in counteracting sleepiness. It's like one thing. This whole phrase is just a thing. We'll talk more about this in the next workshop, like what is the grammar and why does it matter? But the point is to refer back to the old information, we've changed the language and we've put it into a smaller thing, into a noun. There are many ways that we can now be flexible with the idea that we talked about before. So in this case, we're not just referring back to the previous idea, we've also got despite. Yeah, so we're now contrasting with the previous idea. Okay, so one way of thinking about information flow is, okay, how do we refer back to our previous information, do it in a different way, and do it in a way that we can now talk about a new relationship? Yeah, how does this new information, which is it can have a negative impact on sleep, how does that refer to the previous information? It's contrasting information. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about this today when we talk about different kinds of linking language, right? So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. There's also another example lower down here where the way that we structure our sentences kind of reflects the old and the new information. But what I'm trying to get at here is like really, what decisions are you making when you decide which order to write your sentence? So we've just talked about a couple of ideas. Now, it might be because you're introducing old or new information, or it might be, for example, because you want to avoid repetition. Yeah. Now, if you have a quick look at this text here on the left, you might notice something, which is how those sentences are structured. And we just talked about nouns and verbs, right? You might find the same thing here, which is we have noun, a brand name, is, verb. Affirm, noun, could not differentiate, verb, right? And this is like the most basic English sentence. Noun, verb. Noun, verb. You have a thing and it does something. Yeah? It's called the sentence subject. Now, if you do that every sentence, as you can see, it's not very nice to read. Yeah? And it's quite repetitive. So this is not cohesive writing. If you compare that to text B, so it's the same topic, more or less the same words, but notice that they have rearranged things a little bit. So how? What have they changed in the order? What things have they put in different places?
I think in the paragraph B, they also use the structure of noun verb, but they changed the noun. It's not a brand name anymore. It can be like a firm. And then, yeah, the owners of these brands, something like that. So then is you have more nouns, not just only the brand name, because it's pretty boring if you keep repeated again and again.
Well, actually, they have kept the same phrases in there. So we still have the same number of subjects and nouns. It's just the order of the sentences that's changed. So if we look at, for example, a brand name is here, we still have here a brand name is.
Yeah.
The same here. Where was it? Brand owners. The owners of these brand names. Here we still have the owners of these brand names, but it doesn't come first anymore. So instead we have these different sentence beginnings without the brand name, to consumers, indeed, through promotional activities. Most of these were already in the same text, in text A. They've moved them to the beginning, right? So then you have more of a variety of sentence structures. And in some cases, you might have some relevant information first. Now, this is another way that we can rearrange our sentences. Now, that doesn't mean in this case that they've done the same thing we did in the previous slides, right? Maybe not in every case here is it going old, new, old, new, old, new, but at least it's varying the structure. My point here is there are different reasons why you might rearrange your sentence. It might be because of old and new information. It might be to reduce repetition. It might be because you want to put the focus or the emphasis on a different place in your sentence. It really depends what you're doing and what the relationship is between those sentences. So what we're going to try and do in these sessions today and next workshop is to kind of break this down a little bit and look at, okay, how and why might we rearrange our sentences? What can we use to do that? What kind of language can we use? How can we be as flexible as possible with how we structure those sentences and make that cohesion through each sentence as strong, as clear as possible? I think there's something in the chat. Oh, that was also one. Okay. Right. So I'm going to have to skip a little bit because we have, what, 10 minutes left, Wayne? Yeah. So this is something that we're going to address a little bit more in the next workshop, is like different kinds of sentences. So how can we, just like we were saying, if we want to reduce repetition, what new kind of sentence can we make to do that? Or for the reasons we talked about earlier, yeah, to make more logical structure, to make sure our sentences are different structures. So we're going to think first a little bit about like combining information, right? If you have a lot of very short sentences, how do you combine them into longer sentences? There's a lot of ways to do that. I'm sure you already do all of these. So we can use pronouns so that we don't say Callum or the students twice here. So Callum teaches a lot of students, the students are getting good, or they are getting really good. Simplest way we do it, or we can do it with one sentence. So for example, Callum teaches a lot of students. How can I then connect that to the second sentence? Anyone? You can also use the chat if you prefer. So Callum teaches a lot of students, comma. Who, right? So we have words like who, which, where, to basically connect to bits of information, to add the information in one sentence into another sentence. We're not going to talk about this in detail, actually. It gets a little bit complicated. We can if you want. We'll come back to this a little bit next workshop. Similar, so the students are a group from Verovia. They will not have trouble at university. We could instead say, the students are a group from Verovia, but we can now move things around. Yeah, the students who are a group from Verovia will not have trouble at university. Then we have things like noun phrases. I mentioned these earlier. So similarly, like here I've used the relative clause, so who are a group from Verovia. I could do this without using who. How can I make this even shorter?
We can just say the students from Verovia, no?
Great, yeah. So there's a couple of options. We can combine everything into one, the group of students from Verovia, just like you said, or I can just remove the who are from this middle part as well. The students, a group from Verovia, will not have trouble at university. Now, this is really useful when you're trying to combine a lot of pieces of information into one long sentence, and you've said who or which like 3 times. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So then you can come back in and think, okay, how can I rearrange this so that I don't have to keep saying who, which, who, which. And then finally, sorry, not finally, there's one more which is similar here. So Callum is a dedicated teacher. He cycled 40 minutes in the rain. If I don't want to say he, or if I don't want to say Callum, I can do another thing. I can take the verb cycle and I can change it. What can I do here? So Callum is a dedicated teacher, comma. Would be cycling, yeah? We call these participle clauses. And then finally, we can use these linking words that we've talked about. So in this case, Callum is a dedicated teacher. However, he should stop complaining about the weather. I want to make that one sentence. So I don't use however. How can I do that now? Something like this. Yeah, although Callum is a dedicated teacher, he should stop complaining about the weather. But I think we have just enough time left that it's worth talking about this, because another way that we can rearrange our sentences and rearrange the information in our sentences is which of these words we use. Now you all know how to use these words, more or less, but maybe a few of you will have some trouble knowing, well, which word can I use where? So we're going to quickly talk about these. Now, I haven't added this yet, but I'll put this document in the Google Drive, which I think I didn't send you a general link to yet, so I'll send you at the end of the class, or maybe Wynne will send an email out with some useful resources. So this is kind of like a list of all the different kinds of linking languages. You probably know what most of it means, but you might not know how to put it in a sentence. So what's useful about this is there are these, the rows are like different functions, different purposes of linking language, right? So we have, however, down here, it's for contrast, which is quite similar to adversativity, but I'm not going to explain that. So then up here we also have although or even though. So these do similar things, but you have to put them in a different place, right? So like the sentence on the right, we can use however if we start a new sentence and we want to contrast that new sentence with the last sentence. But if I want to make that into one sentence, I have to use a different word. So in this case, although or even though. And so that sentence becomes instead, even though he did not sleep very much. Yeah. So I'm going to just very, very quickly check a few of these. So we're going to look at some other examples, and I'm going to need you to pick the right one for the right place. So here we have 3 sentences which need to be completed with a linking word or phrase. It should be one of the words or phrases in the brackets here. So on your own, just quickly think, which of these 3 should I put? It can only be one. So I'll give you a minute to think about each of these.
The first one would be although we were tired.
That's right. Now, why would it not be nevertheless?
I only know why it's not despite, because despite would go with a noun or like a phrase like being tired or something.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, but with nevertheless, I cannot tell the difference.
It's like the example I just gave here. You would have to make it 2 sentences. Yeah, so it would be, we were tired, period. Nevertheless, we stayed up late. Yeah, good. And we'll talk a bit more about despite next time. All right, the second one, can someone else fill this gap? Not only were the statistics inaccurate, they were invalid.
As well.
As well, good, yeah. Now, why not additionally?
I think usually it's put at the beginning of the sentence, plus comma.
Exactly, it's just like however or nevertheless. You have to split those into 2. And also would have to go somewhere else, yeah? So they...
Also usually used behind the subject.
Well, actually, more likely it would be they were also invalid. But yeah, sometimes you can use also at the beginning of the sentence. It's technically not grammatically correct, but people do it anyway. And the last one, similar issue, right? I left home early. Since, good. I had to do several errands. And again, we can't use because of this, because I have to make 2 sentences. I would also have to rearrange things. And owing to, it's like despite. Yeah, so we would have to use a different structure. Okay, now I expect this hopefully is more or less familiar to you guys. As we're running out of time, what I do want to do though is point out, now if you know how to use these with different structures, this has obvious benefits because then you can restructure your sentences by using different linking language. So we won't have time to get into this in detail, unfortunately, but let's say you had a sentence like this one. There will be tough times ahead for the shipping industry owing to economic crisis. Okay, so we've used specific linking language here, which is we've used owing to. But if I used give rise to, I would have to change the structure. And that could be a good thing, right? Because maybe we want to put the emphasis in a different place in the sentence. Maybe we want to change something about the sentence, which means that we need more flexibility. Does anyone, can anyone do this already? Can anyone think, how can I rewrite this first sentence using this other language?
I think we can drag like the economic crisis gives rise to
tough times ahead.
Tough time ahead for the shipping industry.
Good. Yeah. Now that's very good. There's one tiny thing. Notice in the first example, we say there will be tough times. So we're talking here about the future. And that means that this part will have to be slightly different. Economic crisis. Will give rise to tough times ahead. Yeah. Okay. Now, don't worry too much if you're already like, I'm not sure what to do here. There's a few things going on in these activities. We won't have time to do them all today. What I'll do is I'll leave them here. I've also got some more linking language activities that you can do later if you want to practice a bit more. But for now, the point is more to say, okay, obviously you're not going to be doing this in your writing. You're not going to be like, oh, I want to use a different bit of linking language, unless you're repeating the same linking language. But what you can do is say like, okay, I have to think about how I'm structuring these sentences. So let me just show you some other examples. So here we've got the same sentences like we did earlier in different orders. And in this case, we're using the same linking language. But as you can see, you can actually reverse the order. Now, why might I do that? So let's take this first example. Which of these A and B orders do you think is more logical here? Let's be a bit careful here at looking at the different parts of the sentence, right? So we've got misbehavior in teenagers, right, on the one hand, and we have poor parenting on the other. What is this? Is it misbehavior in teenagers or is it poor parenting?
It's misbehavior.
Exactly, it's misbehavior in teenagers. So that means we actually have to, if it refers to teenagers, then this first order doesn't make sense. So it has to be this one. We have to have this with teenagers misbehaving, because the example, skipping school, drug addiction, yeah, this is teenagers misbehaving. If we do it this way around, it actually completely confuses the sentence, because now it sounds like the parents are skipping school and are addicted to drugs, right? So it does matter how you use your linking language and how you use it to structure your sentences. In this case, I didn't even change the linking language. I just changed the order of the sentence. But you could say the same like we just said here. I could say something like, okay, poor parenting causes misbehavior in teenagers, right? And this would also fix the problem. And in this case, I did it by changing the kind of linking language I used. So not because of, but causes. And there could be a bunch of other reasons why you want to change them here, because you want to put the emphasis somewhere else, because you want to refer back to something that you just talked about. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to move them around. It's about flexibility. It's about having different focus. Okay, someone's had to leave. All right, that's the end of my workshop anyway, though. So just to quickly recap, we're talking here a little bit about the kind of basics of connectivity and sentences, so that you can be more flexible with your order, so that you can be cohesive with your information. Now, what will happen next week, let me just wipe the screen, is we'll be talking a little bit more about this, but we're going to start to look at actual sentences. So how can we not only do this, but what kinds of ways can we structure our sentences? And we're going to practice that. And how can we avoid running into problems? So like we saw at the beginning with those very long and very short sentences, how can we connect our very short sentences together? And how can we avoid problems of grammar and cohesion with our very long sentences? And then later we're going to be moving, sort of zooming out a little bit, thinking more about ideas, so referring to other sources. Yeah, how can we be cohesive when we're talking about literature in our literature reviews? And then also, how can we do this at a wider level, at the paragraph and at the transition between paragraphs, sections, chapters, to make our argument very clear. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's me. I hope we're not running too late, Owen. So that's.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, we kind of shift a little bit. So yeah, I already introduced our next workshops and other support that we provide. So if you guys have questions, or I think this is now this is time for questions. If you have questions about topic that we just discussed, or also any topic that any questions related to thesis writing, it's fine.
We're going to ask like what kind of topic or the focus for the next workshops.
Do you want me to put the thing back up? Yeah, so this is the idea. We'll go sort of increasingly bigger. Yeah, so from words and sentences to literature, to ideas in literature, to paragraphs and sections.
So the series is for writing skills, right?
Mm-hmm. But we'll start to talk a bit more about, this will be quite general, but especially when we get into talking about your sources and your paragraphs and sections, that will be a bit more specific to thesis writing. So like, how do I make sure my chapters have clear transitions between them? And like, how can I clearly link my ideas from introduction to chapter to conclusion?
Thank you.
So this workshops content, Callum and I specifically designed for thesis writers, because we know that, well, from our experience, like especially English is also not my native language. So I know that the problem that occurred to me was, sentence. Like I tend to write very long sentences, and that is normal in Vietnamese writing, but that is really bad in English academic writing. But also in academic writing, you tend to also have very complex concept that you need a long sentence to clearly explain it. So that is why we want to look at sentence length and sentence structures, like how to present complex concept in a in a clear way and cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like very relevant to academic thesis writers, and that's why you see like a lot of samples that we use are also from academic texts.
Yeah, and it might be worth pointing out at this stage, in case it's not clear, the reason we start here with what we talked about today, which I understand is quite general and it's quite sort of language points, it's because we're going to be using these things as we talk more about thesis specific stuff. So when I start to talk about clarifying your argumentative structure, we're going to talk about things like topic sentences, summarizing your ideas, and we're going to do that using some of the things that we talked about. So I kind of have to start here at a very general ground so that we can move on to talk about more specific thesis related skills and techniques.
Thank you.
Another thing, it might be a little bit different. I mean, the next workshops will be a little bit different from this one, because this one was open to the public. Well, I kind of, expected that people sign up, and if they said that they will attend, they would. But in the next workshops, we will have a small group like this, 6 or 8 students, so that we will have the chance to look at your writing. Mm-hmm. And then help you to see the problems in your writing, how you can.
Yeah, and that does also mean we have a little bit more space for you to tell us what you want to do. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to completely throw away these topics and choose different topics, but maybe, for example, you really want to focus more on something, or you want something to be explained more. That's going to be more possible in a smaller group with our future workshops. Yeah.
Any other questions? Can be about research skills, methodology, or I received some general questions in the registration form, how to write a good thesis. I think that we might need like many lectures for that. But any specific questions we can answer now.